Israel Adesanya here. Look at that slip.
There's that slide back left hand right off the temple, drops him, and Israel goes.
Yikes. Let's talk about what happened here. If you haven't seen my guide yet, I have a complete breakdown of Israel Adesanya's signature moves, the principles of his fighting style, and more. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can go check it out. Let's move forward from here. Now, Adesanya manages to retain his championship title in defeating Paulo Costa. Costa definitely had the power to put anyone out, but the question coming into this fight was if Paulo could actually manage to get in there and connect his shots. Costa, he's not exactly the most technical fighter, but he's fundamentally sound and he has some of the hardest punches in the division. We've seen cases where fighters like this win, but in this fight, we saw a classic stylebender fight, one where he used his range intelligently. He used his crafty footwork and his precise striking. This is exactly what we got. From the start of the fight, Costa tried to press forward, try to find his way to breach Adesanya's range, but he just couldn't do it. Adesanya would constantly throw kicks, various rhythms, and pop his jab from range, and it would deter Costa from advancing forward. Adesanya is really good at using his range from all the distances. He can fight from the kicking range, he could fight at the end of his punching range, and he can even fight in the pocket. And Costa, he paid the price, attempting to exchange in the pocket, and we saw the same thing happen to Robert Whittaker too when he tried trading in the pocket with Adesanya. Let's get into some of the technical details a little bit more to explain why exchanging the pocket with Israel Adesanya is so dangerous. The first thing to understand is that Adesanya is very good at striking at the end of his reach. For example, he would throw his shots in a way where he wouldn't commit past his target. You'll notice that Adesanya never really extends his reach beyond his striking range. This meant that if he landed or not, Costa wouldn't be in range to land back. This is why Costa didn't counter without closing the gap. He seemed to be careful about closing in because he respected Adesanya's counter-punching. The most important sequence was the final knockdown. So Adesanya is going to slip the shot, then throw his overhand. This causes Costa to fall over. And from here, Adesanya is going to use his fade back lead hook where he could catch him with a counter shot while moving into a safe distance. This highlights a very dangerous attribute about fighting opponents with a longer reach. They have access to a particularly useful tool that makes them hard to hit. So consider just about 3 different punching ranges in this kind of matchup. Now there's a range where none of them can hit each other, and this is generally where you're going to measure your opponent's longest weapon before you breach through that range. And then there's a range where they can both hit each other. And then there's a sweet spot range where Costa can't hit him because Adesanya is outside of his striking range, but Adesanya can still hit him. This is where the fade back lead hook comes in. Longer fighters can actually lean back slightly to enter this sweet spot range at any point while they're trading shots in the pocket. This allows them to retaliate while being out of the opponent's striking range, but still inside their own striking zone. And a similar thing happened to Whittaker too when he tried to trade in the pocket of Adesanya. So in this example, you're going to see that they're both in the striking range. But then as Adesanya fades back, he throws his lead hook. And he's going to leave the red zone where Whittaker's striking zone is, and this is where he enters his sweet spot zone. Now you're going to see that his head is slightly outside of Whittaker's red striking zone, but he can still connect his own shot. And you see Whittaker miss his shot by a few inches there. Now striking is a game of inches, and playing that kind of game with Adesanya is very risky. This is why fighting him in the pocket can be so dangerous. And if you get too greedy in the pocket, Adesanya can decide to lean back and hit you with a strike. Longer fighters tend to be good at doing this, particularly someone like Nate Diaz. If you look at his fight with Michael Johnson, one of the signature tactics that he was doing was poking with a jab or a cross, and then he was punishing him by moving into sweet spot with that fading lead hook. Because Nate's arms are so long, he can enter that sweet spot range where he can just hit Johnson and avoid getting hit altogether. The story of this fight was all about range. Adesanya was landing at will using a lot of leg kicks and different teeps to the leg. When Costa tried to move in, Adesanya would always reach out to the arms to control Costa's weapons. When he wanted Costa to retract his arms, he would fire leg kicks or head kicks. When you're hand fighting with an opponent, if you want them to disable their arms, throwing head kicks or leg kicks is a good way to disable them because you typically need both arms to block a shot. So by throwing a kick, they'll be forced to remove their hands. There was a neat moment when Adesanya was controlling the range, and then he threw the rear hand. It almost looked like it was disguised as a cross. and then he transitioned into a head kick after Costa tried parrying the rear hand. It reminded me of Max Holloway when he dropped Alexander Volkanovski, and I'll play the clip here for you. In this sequence, you're going to see that he's going to throw out that rear hand, he's going to pump it forward, and it almost looks like a cross. So Alex is going to go for that bait, so he's going to try to slip off slightly and try to parry with that rear hand. But you notice that instead of throwing that rear hand, a kick actually comes right over the top and he drops it. Other opponents had strategies for successfully closing the gap to score offense. With Gastelum, he was using the hop step to close the distance. This kind of footwork is specifically used to close large gaps, and it's useful for fighters who have the shorter reach. For Whittaker, he was using the timing of Adesanya's forward advancements and that rhythm to move in with a stepping jab to put him on the back foot. But when it came to Costa, he didn't have much in his toolset to close the distance other than trying to cut off the cage. His ability to cut off the cage just wasn't enough to compete with Adesanya's ability to move away from those traps. When Costa tried cutting off the cage, Adesanya realized what Costa was doing and he exited to the side that Costa left unguarded.
And I knew, because he was cutting me off, we are the best City Kickboxing. He closed off his left side, so he can only give me his right side. But when he overly committed to the left side, closing it off, I had heaps of room to move on the right side. He kicked me twice in the ribs. Man, nothing. I ate those. The second one, I made him pay.
Adesanya seemed to know what Costa was trying to do. He knew that Costa was trying to cut off the cage to one side, then trying to punish him with kicks moving to the other side. And he wanted to draw him into that kick. But Adesanya was sometimes, he would catch on and then he would use the classic kickboxing counter to catch and return fire. And as usual, we saw Adesanya use his signature moves like his hip feints, his front step feints with his low hand pump, and his question mark kicks, but I covered those technical details and how it works in my previous video, so I won't get into it here, but I left a link below if you want to know more. Overall, this seemed like an easy fight for Adesanya, and at this point, just looking at his record, he's already beaten some of the best technicians in the division. And if there's anybody left who can match his craft, I am not too sure about that. And whoever that fighter is, all we know is a few things. They're going to have to be good at understanding how to close that gap, and they have to be very mindful of Adesanya's counters and his use of range. Be sure to check out my WordPress page. I have a lot of analysis on there that's not on my YouTube channel. And if there's anything that happens to my videos on here that go missing, you can always go to my WordPress. I'll link it in the description below. And thanks everybody for watching.